Oh, the humanity. I watched DC on the Beyond the Grid podcast today and I can't believe it. I never rated DC very highly. And by his own confession, he was never that good, never one of the greats. But sometimes, contrary to popular belief, sometimes the story of the losers is more interesting. What they did to get over the hump. And DC's story on the Beyond the Grid podcast was nothing short of extraordinary. I will be honest with you. I had to take notes. There's so much to cover. He talked about his journey, what he didn't have as far, or as versus even, the true great ones, as versus a Lewis, as versus a Max, as versus Alan, Senna, Nigel Mansell too. I was like, what? The level of insight is bonkers. He talked about his journey, why he didn't want to sign for Jaguar but ultimately signed for Red Bull, who had taken him over. He talked about favoritism at McLaren, etc. The fact that Ron Dennis's guy was always Mika Hakkinen. Why? Getting to the bottom of that. It's God tier, and I promise you're going to go through it all so that you don't have to listen, although I would recommend that you go and listen to it. Spectacular stuff. If you enjoy insight into Formula One, sometimes hearing these drivers that operated during peak oil Formula One is infinitely more insightful than watching it as at July 2024. The levels, it's different. Put words to it in a way that's so colourful and almost its texture. It provides you with the linguistic rich tapestry of Formula One, the ins and outs, in a way that watching Netflix's Drive to Survive will never get you there. Puts you in the cockpit in real time. The details are crazy. Let me tell you this first, what DC said about Formula One, because I love this piece. It's God tier. First, he says there is something uninteresting, unremarkable about life. Real life as versus Formula One. He says that in Formula One, all that it respects, all that you need to get done is exceptional. Indeed, Formula One is geared up for the exceptional. In real life, underwhelming, DC says. Who is this chap? He talks about his adherence to certain preparation protocols. That is one piece of advice for his son or any other F1 driver would be to unpack their bag when they get into the hotel and make their bed. This is a military man in his mindset. And again, it permeates everything that he is. Don't think for a second that because this dude didn't make it to that exceptional level, that DC didn't try everything. He spoke about outworking. He spoke about the importance of industry. He even got a sports psychologist, for Pete's sake, to try and tap into brainwaves to trigger the highest of his performance. But the problem for DC says, was that he couldn't do it week in, week out like the greats. On any given Sunday, a la a 2002 at Monaco or a 1998 at Magny-Cours, he could be exceptional, brilliant even, a race winner. But he said the next weekend he just lacked the ability to sustain it, to do it consistently. Some say that excellence is indeed what you do every day, and DC is testament to this. Again, that's what he lacked. That inability to replicate the goatiest of his performances week in, week out was always going to hamstring him. It's chaotic, this. An honest insight into a Formula One driver. And again, not the goatiest of them, but a driver who tried his hardest and was brave, by the way. Is this with DC? For the avoidance of that. And he didn't speak to this in the Beyond the Grid podcast, but I remember this was a period of time as far as F1 that I lived through. In 1994, when Senna passed at Imola, tragically, Tamburello corner, there was a lot of speculation around Williams. What caused that incident? Because lest we forget, Senna was the best of them. So similar to Jim Clark at the time, if Senna passed, then none of the others were safe. It could not be driver error. So automatically, therefore, by extension, you look towards the car for blame, right? Was there something wrong with the steering column? Did the car bottom out? These were all of the rumours and speculation around the time. Who was going to get in there after Ayrton Senna passed and drive that car at the very next race weekend at Monaco? None other than DC. Bravery, any. And props to Damon Hill too, who didn't back out, notwithstanding the fact that his teammate had passed, and his old man, Graham Hill, legend of Formula One, man who won the championship in '68. His father had also passed in an accident. Props to those guys. And again, listen, I speak about F1 in July of 2024 being sanitised. Maybe a tad, not too safe. That's not the right words. That's not the right turn of phrase. But you get where I'm going. We don't want F1 snowflakery. In 1994, both Damon Hill and DC were testament to this sport being something different. These lot had a different type of cojones. Getting in the car 1 week after Ayrton Senna had died. What are we doing? I'm not doing that. Indeed, I don't have those sort of brave pills to take. And again, this is the delineating line between not just F1 drivers, but the goatiest ones of them. DC wasn't the goatiest, but he was very, very good and bloody brave. What are we doing? Go on then. So DC admits in this interview with Beyond the Grid that he was never going to be a champion. He just didn't have it. And again, when I'm talking about have it, he keeps referring throughout the interview to the exceptional. Remember, he replaced Ayrton Senna, who of course was exceptional. But when asked to define what exceptional is, he talks about Max and Lewis, that they have it. He refers to Max being one of the best that he's ever seen already at the ripe old age of 26. As a case in point, he talks about Austria and his pole lap. And again, I don't think too many people, not enough people are talking about the greatness that's wrapped up in that lap. Manifest in Max Verstappen's pole lap at Austria, a lap that takes 60 seconds to go around, as near as makes no difference. Max Verstappen was 4/10 up on the rest of the field. 4/10. DC speaks to this and he says it was the pinnacle. What Max Verstappen did then at the Austrian Grand Prix, putting that pole lap together, was the pinnacle of the symbiosis of man meets machine. Oh, the humanity. So too, DC expounds on Maximilian Verstappen's performance at Austria, speaking about the sprint race, being overtaken in turn 3, and then seeding, flipping reverse that into turn 4. Again, that's not a place that you overtake at Austria, is it? Turn 4, especially not when Lando Norris has his DRS open. You are managing overspeed, slipstream. You're not supposed to be able to do these things, but DC characterises this as a symptom, a fundamental thing that all of the GOATs can do. Common denominator settings being a way to find an opportunity where there is none. And Max, Lewis, Senna, Prost, they all do this, do they not? Ordinary drivers cannot do this. They can't find opportunity where there is none. But as a brilliant case in point, it is Max Verstappen, turn 4 in the sprint race, with the other chap ahead of him, Lando Norris, with DRS open. You do not do that. You should not be able to do that, lest, of course, you are one of the very great ones. He talks about Ron Dennis too. And again, the stark contrast. He was considering in the latter stages of his career signing for Jaguar, wasn't he? But he didn't want to just make up the numbers. He wasn't concerned with being an also-ran, working for a mid-team. He says when he viewed Jaguar, they were playing F1 by the numbers. It was a financial exercise more than a sporting endeavour. And even though he was in the latter stages of his career, DC said he wasn't going to sign up for that he was well prepared to retire than make up the numbers. It wasn't something that was in his DNA. And this is what I love about DC. Though he wasn't one of the exceptional ones, not the true goatiest ones, it wasn't for want of trying or endeavour. And I appreciate that in the man. I disrespected David Coulthard for the longest time, thought he was F1 flotsam and jetsam, but in this interview he talks to all of the things that he tried to do to get there. For the avoidance of doubt, him not being goated, it wasn't for lack of trying, effort or endeavour, and I appreciate that, particularly my old age and grey beardedness. He talks about the exceptionals. He says what they are, what Max, Lewis, Alain, Senna, Mansell are. They're good in any conditions, whether it's wet, whether we're talking racecraft, whether it's quali, whether it's wheel to wheel. They have the ability to draw out pace from their AWS on request almost. DC says that he couldn't do that. On the other occasion, again, please see Magnicor 1998 and Monaco 2002. He had it in him. He said that he would wake up and know that he was going to have a good day. Even at Monaco 02, he said the morning that he woke up, he laid out his kilt knowing that he was going to have to go back and get it and celebrate because he was going to win that race in Monaco. Tom Clarkson says that's just like Fernando Alonso, who wakes up knowing whether or not that he's going to have a good day. Again, a peculiarity of the good ones, if not all F1 drivers necessarily. But again, talking of Ron Dennis, when he went to sign for Jaguar, F1 by numbers and he wasn't interested. He said what he was used to at McLaren is killers. F1 danger mice in terms of Ron Dennis as a team principal and the head of engines at the time. He said they would chase and pursue, scratch and claw for any split second worth of advantage. They would think up a piece to put on the car, a component, and have it manufactured the next day. That's what he was dealing with. That's the world-class mindset of the people with which he was used to working. He couldn't go to Jaguar, he said. He wasn't prepared to make up the numbers. But when he went to Red Bull, when Red Bull took over Jaguar even, Mark Mateschitz said two things to him. First, we get the respect of the paddock. And second, we win championships. DC said he said it in a matter-of-fact way that made him knew that Dietrich was serious. He was prepared to put the financial resources behind Red Bull. And although DC wouldn't be there long enough to fulfill that promise, he saw the starting of it right and was part of that. And again, DC was a fundamental piece, a building block of Red Bull's success for two reasons. Firstly, he was used to world-class mindsets and world-class people, world-class working practices even, by virtue of the fact that he'd been at McLaren before, that he'd been at Williams before, he'd worked with Adrian Newey and these type of guys. Secondly, he was a decent driver now with decent level of experience. He spoke about the gap between him and the very best, Mika Hakkinen and Michael Schumacher at the time. Naivete and experience. No longer was that the case by the time he was at the Bulls that were red, hence why he could contribute to them as a startup Formula One team, getting some of their best results the very year after they'd purchased that team from Jaguar. Oh, the humanity. I'm telling you, you have to go and watch this thing. I'm not gassing. Impressive. I did not rate David Coulthard. F1 flotsam and jetsam is what I thought incorrectly. But hearing him talk about these things, levels, God tier levels of insight. If you like F1, you are compelled. Obligatory listening is this Beyond the Grid podcast with David Coulthard. But I digress. 2. David Coulthard talks about the greatest, because again, lest we forget that he rubbed shoulders in real time with Messrs Prost, Senna, Nigel Mansell too. Hill also. What are we doing? Tom Clarkson asked him, did those guys share any common features being goats? DC said, of course they did. However, they were more different than they were similar. Prost as an example. Check this out and tell me you don't get excited about this. Prost, introverted, he says, always was biting his nails, keen to limit his track time because he realised any time he was out on track it could be a potential incident, a potential life-threatening incident. Prost, the professor, would much prefer to do the analysis and understand, set up the car for the race. Again, super efficient and sparing with his time spent out on track. Oh, the humanity. How do you not love this? Senna, committed, semblance of arrogance, and again, nothing that we didn't know. Talking about Mansell, strong, physically, and again, this is the era when there was no power steering. You got to wrestle these cars right, changing gear settings, and a nearing belief, DC said, maybe, however, a tad bit arrogant, never keen to do the testing, was he? Techie this. I'm telling you, my eyes light up each and every single time. He talks about a couple of different instances as well. McLaren, really, really good story. So again, Mika Hakkinen was Ron Dennis's boy, right? He talks about going into McLaren the first day and Ron Dennis rocking up. Mika Hakkinen is on one side with his race engineer and his performance engineer. DC on the other side with his race engineer and his performance engineer. Ron Dennis rocks up. DC does the polite thing as you would do on your first day. Stands to attention and goes to shake the boss's hand. Ron Dennis walks right past him and goes over to Mika Hakkinen's side of the table with his performance engineer and his race engineer. Oh, the humanity. DC's like, what's this? But whatever, that's cool. Ron Dennis's first words that day were, what are we doing? And when he's talking about we, he's talking about Mika Hakkinen's side of the table being Mika's race engineer and Mika's performance engineer. He's not talking about DC's side of the garage. DC's race engineer and DC's performance engineer. DC's like, oh, that's strange. Don't want to set a precedent here, but that's strange. Ron Dennis's next thing that comes out of his mouth, what are they doing over there? DC's like, us and them. When he's saying they, he's talking about DC's race engineer and DC's performance engineer. Clear us and them. But DC, so industrious was he, so determined to be successful, or at least maximise for his potential. He understood what time it was. Here's how he got to the bottom of that. One day he asked Ron, what's all this about? Mika Hakkinen's your favourite, right? Like, why am I being treated like this? He likened it to setting somebody up as the CEO of a company. You've got two twins, DC said. Both of them are going to be the CEO of the company. However, one, you bring him or her in and give them a crash course in the company. Give them a crash course in what it means to be a CEO, what good CEOing looks like. You leave the other one on their Jack Jones. That's what he said he felt like, DC. He felt like the twin that had been left on his Jack Jones. So he had words with Ron Dennis. He didn't want to rock the boat necessarily. He knew what time it was, although he didn't think ever for a second that he was on the receiving end of favourable treatment. But he asked Ron Dennis face to face, what's going on here? You are happier as a team, McLaren, when Mika Hakkinen wins. What's that about? DC says, oh, the humanity. You know what Ron Dennis replied to him? He said, I've never lost a driver, as in a driver's never died in my car, but Mika Hakkinen very nearly did. And again, I want to say it was at Melbourne, Adelaide potentially. Mika Hakkinen fractured his skull, didn't he? And again, as a result of that accident, this is why Mika Hakkinen still to this day wears a hearing aid. His hearing was detrimented materially because his skull was fractured from ear to ear. Ron Dennis said, when I went to visit Mika Hakkinen in the hospital and he was on an induced coma, that's why Mika Hakkinen will always be my favourite. DC says, understood. Copy, boss. And again, he had to work around it. What he knew from then, he understood the reason, and he knew that ultimately he was never going to be the prodigal son, but he could work around it once he understood Ron Dennis and his raison d'etre. Chaos. Can you imagine working in a McLaren team under Ron Dennis, knowing that the driver on the other side of the garage was always going to be the favourite? Oh, the humanity too. Go on, get this. You'll like this as well. Mika Hakkinen, Ron DC, get your words out, Cameron. DC also talks about the financial reward, that sometimes he made mistakes at critical times. He talks about Melbourne 98 and he goes, there was 2.7 million on the line were he to get his 2 wins that season. Sadly, he missed out because, of course, he had an accident. He crashed when he was going into the pits, didn't he? Overrun. RPM settings. He said that day, had he not crashed, had he secured his second victory, and again he was too eager, too young, too naive, too inexperienced. He said he had material delta. He was leading the race in hand. He had time to spare. However, he was too eager coming in the pits and stacked it. He said that mistake that time cost him 2.7 million. 2.75. What are we doing here? That's bonkers. Unbelievable settings. I don't know, listening to this dude talk about the ins and outs of his F1 career, his experience, absolute chaos. They talk about team orders. Melbourne 98, they had an agreement, and again, this is a function of the favoritism, is it not? DC and Mika Hakkinen in 1998 had an agreement. Per Senna and Prost back in the day in Estoril had an agreement that whoever would make the first turn first would go on to win the race. And again, owing to the fact that Mika Hakkinen had trouble hearing, they told him to cool the brakes, and he heard come in the pits. Mika Hakkinen was way through the pits, but that ultimately gave DC the advantage, did it not? Techie, they ordered DC to cede the place back to Mika Hakkinen. DC was like, I'm not ceding it. Why am I giving Mika Hakkinen the place? I already know it's favoritism. Mika Hakkinen's made a wrong decision. You told him to call the brakes and he heard box. That's his business. I'm going to go on and I'm going to win this race. The command that he got from McLaren and Ron Dennis is that you are jeopardizing your place in the team. You guys know what that means, doesn't it? Do this. Fail to cede the place to the prodigal son Mika Hakkinen, and you might not be in this team next year. Mate, different type. I'm telling you guys, chaos, absolute chaos. You have to listen to this thing. And finally, let me tell you this one as well, because it's far too chaotic. He talks as well. Go on then. This is quite an interesting point, because you hear these drivers today talk about 24 races being too much. DC says rubbish. Says back in the day, he was driving on the 23rd of December straight back in the car on January 2nd, owing to the fact that they had unlimited testing. He says, yeah, they have a lot of races today, 24 of as at July 2024. However, in truth, if we're quantifying their workload in terms of mileage, DC's like back in the day, we did so much more mileage than these guys did. These guys don't even know they were born. Ridiculous levels. I'm telling you, bonkers. Let me give you this again as well. I've just spotted the quote. I know I've said it already, but I love when DC starts talking about the difference between F1 and real life. Bonkers. He says, quote, nobody survives in this environment that they call F1. If you don't have drive, if you don't have vision, if you don't have work ethic, if you don't care, you can come and enjoy it for a time, but either they will dip out the paddock or the paddock will decide that your time's up. Over humanity. How can you get... Listen, I love this sport, you know. And hearing DC talk about it like this in kind, in earnest, giving us that level of insight, I'm telling you, it only turns me onto it more. Chaos. He says it's a rare air environment is the F1 paddock of people that just get it done. I'm going to say that again. The F1 paddock is a rare air environment, rarefied air even, constituting people that just get it done. He continues, relatively, everyday life is so underwhelming. A package, he's talking about the post here, look at this. He says that a package will come between 12 and 3. So what's that? 12 and 3. Between the hours of 12 and 3. He says that even a plane doesn't take off between 12 and 3. Everyday life is really geared up to meet mediocrity. He says F1 in stark contrast is entirely geared up to the exceptional. Who is this dude? And again, this is only David Coulthard, right? He wasn't a goat here. He wasn't one of the goats. But this again typifies, epitomizes even the level of attention to detail, being so meticulous. This is what it takes, even if you're to be a 7, 8 out of 10 driver. We're not talking about Lewis or Maxi. We're talking about David Coulthard. But again, he's giving rise. He's telling you. Go on then. I want to tell you about this as well before we go back and forth. Look, Martin Whitmarsh. so after DC had left McLaren, and again, he knew that he didn't want to finish his career, but what he didn't want to do is go to a Jaguar as an example. who were flotsam and jetsam F1. Who F1 by the numbers, he said. He wanted to go to a Red Bull. And so once Red Bull took over Jaguar, and then he had that conversation with Dietrich Mateschitz, and he knew that they were looking to, quote, affect change, then he realised that that was a team that he could go to because they wanted to win. And he wanted to win. Even though he was a mediocre driver, even by his own admission, he's still in the latter stages of his career. He just wanted to win. He says he was invited to an event and they prepared a bike for him as his present. Martin Whitmarsh, the Joker, again McLaren affiliate, but a line stepper, shall we say, cracked a joke in front of thousands of people to DC, presented him with this bike as a present, and he cracked the joke, "On your bike, son," as he was leaving McLaren. DC said, "Really? What, you're cracking jokes here, Martin Whitmarsh? You think this is funny? You know what, Martin, you're going to see me, chap, even though I'm in the latter stages of my career." DC says, "You're going to see me and you're going to hear from me. Here's what I'm going to do. If you think this is a joke, you think this is funny, you think this F1 thing is a game because I'm in the latter stages. Go on, then here's what I'm going to do," DC says. "I'm going to go to another team and I'm going to steal all of your best engineers." What do you mean? Adrian Newey et al. And what did Adrian Newey do? Of course, DC, because he doesn't joke. He's not somebody to be messed around with. He did exactly what he says because a Scotsman always delivers on his promises. And he stole Adrian Newey and took him across to Red Bull. Put that in your pipe, Martin Whitmarsh, and smoke it. What are we doing here? God tier podcast, God tier interview. Although DC might not necessarily be the God tieriest of F1 drivers, his industry, his attention to detail, his meticulous approach, getting a sports psychologist, trying to understand and improve for his driving style in real time, trying to filter out the mistakes or at least trying to trend them to zero. Learning from some of the goatiest who have ever done it in Senna, of course, Prost, tried to take from the, like it's all in there. You've got to listen to this podcast. How do you like your F1? Levels, I'm telling you. And I've missed bits. I know I've missed bits. Even the interaction with Hakkinen, Whitmarsh, Ron Dennis. He talks about Ron Dennis again, F1 by the numbers. He didn't want to go and do that at Jaguar. However, he said the difference between a Jaguar, he'd always been around Frank Williams at Williams. Killers. He'd always been around Ron Dennis. And again, those lot would have killed for a split second of time. Again, if they spotted a component that would give them even a millisecond, they would develop that and manufacture it in 24 hours time. So desperate and so keen were they to beat everyone else on the grid. That's what DC came up with. And those are the people with whom he worked. He was a function of them. Hence why he couldn't go to Jaguar and sit there and be F1 flotsam and jetsam. Oh, the humanity. Go and watch that podcast because it is absolutely epic. Visual, what's going on, Visual? Mark, great insight. Mark, I'm telling you, you need to go and watch this. I will link it underneath, but it's a different level. Another content creator stole your fake story intro. Really? Safak, give me a link. Give me a link. I'm keen to see it. DC has more wins than anyone on the grid besides these chaps. And I think listen, I will confess, I have to put some respect on DC's name. I disrespected David Coulthard in real time because he was never the go-to. By his own confession, I mean, he was never going to race with Schumacher. 2002, he managed it, but like on occasion. And again, he says it that on occasion he could have been brilliant. He could win a 2002 Monaco and get to the first turn first and beat Montoya. Like he had that in him on occasion, but by his own confession, he wasn't good enough often enough. And that's what separates a DC from the likes of a Senna or a Lewis or a Max. Different in their ability to deliver and tap into that under the most extreme pressure with some form of regularity. I only see 54 like Tony, you're a legend. Safak. Was it Safak? Safak, I can't. Yeah, techie. He can do what he wants to do, innit? I'll have a cheeky look at it, but to be fair, it's not mine, Safak. I can't lay claim to that. That thing belongs to Conor McGregor originally, and if Do you know what I mean? If somebody wants to plagiarise it, then leave them to it. I can't talk negatively about any other people in the space. It's hard enough as it is for me to come on here and start disparaging other people. I never took the chance to know this history, but I will now. That was my top. Yeah, go and Chiba, have a look at it. Tony, only see 50. Safak began to praise it. Safak, I've seen it. I've seen it. Could do what he wants. Safak, I don't know. Why is DC on the pedestal today at Red Bull as well? He brought their cause forward. Jay, this is exactly it. He'd gone through all this. He'd worked with leaders in their class, right? And so by osmosis, at the time when he was doing it, when he first joined Williams, by his own admission, he was green. Please see Lando Norris a couple of years ago. He said he didn't know, he just didn't have the minerals. But again, he acquired them by osmosis, working with the go-tiest ones at Williams, working with an Adrian Newey at McLaren. So by the time he got to Red Bull, he had all the tools. He was the one that knew what market-leading F1ing is. He was that guy. And so he was able to bring these tools to Christian Horner, who at the time, he was the Formula One virgin. So again, that's why when they're always doing the 20th anniversary, they've got to pay homage to DC, because Red Bull is the house that he helped built. Do you know what I mean? Props to the chap. I see DC as a Charles Leclerc sort. You know what, Macon? I think you're doing DC a disservice there, mate. You need to go, honestly, Macon, go and listen to this podcast so you can hear this dude talk for himself. Like, I can't do it. I've tried my best to, but I can't do it justice. Particularly when he was spiteful. When Martin Whitmarsh cracked that joke, on your bike, son. That's a very English joke that you crack about somebody that's got to leave. When you can see DC's reaction to that, he's like, really? What, we're cracking jokes here, mate, as I'm actually leaving McLaren here? How about I will see you that, I'm going to raise you this, I'm leaving and I'm going to join another team. I'm taking your best technical minds with me. Please see Adrian Newey. Where did Adrian Newey end up? Red Bull, of course. My Scots pal got me into F1, so I'm keen to see DC succeed. But alas, he was just not the man. Like he says, consistency was Achilles' heel. Yeah, he was brilliant on occasion, Pab, but I don't know. There are more DCs than there are Maxes and Lewises, right? Like, it just doesn't. It doesn't. I don't know. And I think their story's more interesting. Sometimes DC stories. I was impressed. Northbound, you're a legend. Off topic, sorry. But I don't support Ocon at Haas next to Behrman. Haas need to show Behrman some support. Oh, the humanity, Northbound. Are we getting into it? Oh, we getting into it. Safak, it's imitation is a form of flattery, is it not? Safak, look forward, Safak. I don't want to look back disparagingly. Don't mean to like them both. Go on then, Northbound. And thank you so much, Northbound. You're far too kind. Yeah, I think Behrman's vulnerable now to Ocon. Ocon is a moth to a flame when he's got a chance of overtake. He doesn't care whether it's his teammate. Monaco is a testament to this, right? Whether it's his teammate or other. If he sees a move, he has to go for it. Max Verstappen too, when he tried to unlap himself back in the day in Brazil. He just can't. George Russell syndrome, right? He needs to learn how to chew his food before he swallows. That move on Gasly in Monaco, I mean, I know there is always time to be gained versus the others on the first lap, right? But it's Monaco, bro. That's your home. That's your home race. Alpine settings. Do you know what I mean? What are we doing? No, you're a legend, Jomo. Big up yourself and big up Northbound. Far too kind. I think they do. Northbound, to finish off your point, I think they do leave Ollie Behrman. You kind of want Ollie to be alongside of Fernando Alonso, and even that might be too tougher. You need Lewis would be nice, ideally, because Lewis is just the deeply embedded niceness. He's not gonna sabotage anyone. Probably you might want to argue that Ocon might be the worst person alongside whom you want to see Ollie Behrman in his first season, and it's he's going to be emotionally like, do you know what I mean? You might not, yeah. But Ocon is good though, is the problem. Ocon is good. Like, he can get you points, and if you're harsh, I see why they'd sign him. But again, maybe not in the best interest of Ollie Northbound. Matthew, far too kind, sir. I watched your video with Nasha recently. I know he's your friend and I do respect him, but his dislike for Max can get over the top, man. I am different to Nasha. I think that's why we have such good conversations, me and Nasha of Quick Stop F1. What Matthew Brown's referring to, I did a podcast with a good friend, like, but borderline brothers, to be fair. Like, we go back and forth on his channel, Quick Stop F1. The latest podcast is out now, and we argued for as near as makes no difference, I want to say about at least 60 minutes about Max versus Lewis. And I didn't want to get into it with that for various different reasons, but it got techie. It got techie because I think Nasha's a Lewis fan, a die-hard Lewis fan. But Nasha's also, credit to him, Nasha's not a new, like I call them post-2007 Lewis fans, or even post-2021. Nasha's like a F1 like a proper die-hard old school. So when we have our conversations offline, Nasha can just roll out like he's learned as far as Formula One things. He can list off 94 in Adelaide, and this happened on this lap, and it was lap 60. He'll know about Tamburello 90, but like he's a proper F1 mind. So when we have our discussions offline, they look different to the conversation that Nasha will have on a podcast, right? Because he's the audience is Lewis Hamilton. So I don't know. We all always argue. He's a Lewis fan, but deep down I know that Nasha knows exactly how good Max Verstappen is, and that's what I was trying to tease out of Nasha during that conversation, Matthew. But you're a legend. OVT, what's going on? DC even on his own podcast shows a lot of class. Not easy sharing a mic. You're absolutely on money, Tony. I rate him. I do rate him. It was a really good Beyond the Grid. That was like much better than Lando. Like, DC was adding, he was like dropping bars and spewing knowledge. Anytime I listen to a podcast and I can take something away from it and learn, especially something about F1 that I didn't know otherwise. How about Alan Prost being an introvert, always biting his nails, wanted to limit track time because it was too risky, would prefer to spend the time with his engineers, like deep diving for analytics, mate. Octay, you're a legend. Hi, Cameron. Since joining Red Bull for the 2016 Spanish GP, Max Verstappen has only crossed the line outside of points for the team on one account, mate. My goat, says Octay. He's not half bad. Any which way you want to cut it on Max Verstappen. And again, I'm going to keep talking to this because, again, this is the reason why I watch Formula One for excellence. And they will come for me, and then my shoulders are broad enough to take, why is Cameron talking about Max Verstappen again? Well, because I don't think it's talked about often enough. That Austria thing, look, let me try and put words to this, Octay, since you've got me on the Max Verstappen excellent train again. That performance, two things happened in Austria that I think we will revisit several years from now, or that I'll remember at least. That qualifying lap still makes no sense. That lap is 64 seconds to get around that lap. 4/10 is a gargantuan amount as a percentage of the whole. 4/10 between Max and the rest. What? The other 19 best drivers in the world, and you put 4/10. DC puts it better than I could. He says that when he saw Max drop a lap 4/10 quicker, he attributed that to. He said that he thought that was just track evolution. It had to be right. There's no way that Max could be 4/10 quicker than the rest than the other 19. It just didn't make sense. And then it turns out when the other guys come around, it was genuinely 4/10. That was the quantum. Max Verstappen had put 4/10 on the rest. Explain to me how. Chaos, obviously Sector 3 had a lot to do. When you watch the onboard, you can see Sector 3 is carrying ridiculous pace for those turns. Part of that, obviously, you need to attribute to the car. But Sergio Checo Perez weren't doing that. So what are we doing here? It's daft. And again, I think I want to say turn 5, turn 6, when he comes out, again, it's a left-hander and it throws you wide onto the curbing. Obviously on the curbing, there's less traction. So he spends the minimal time on the curbing. You see him dart back across to the black stuff, but then the next turn takes you left, which necessitates you darting back out right to the curbing. He's the only one of those drivers who, of the onboards that I saw. Max was the only one of those drivers on his qualifying lap. As he's turning into the next corner, you obviously want to straight line the turn right. And he's just so precise that he straight lines it. If you straight line, Lando, in his straight lining of the next turn after turn 5, turn 6, I don't remember, he was just taking curb. He just thought, Charles again. Charles didn't even move from the curb back onto the black stuff. He just took the traction hit, traction tax. Max, because he's so into the detail, into the minutiae, he wasn't looking to take the traction hit that was spending time on the curb. So he darts across onto the black stuff and then darts back right to try and straight line the next turn. But he does it in such a way that he doesn't touch the curb. It's just genius. I'm not explaining it very well, but I'm telling you, like, you like levels. And then, like, check out, okay, so we don't even need to talk about the race because it's controversial and some more hating for it, whatever. Let's talk about the sprint race. Lando Norris pulled off a brilliant manoeuvre, right? Absolutely took Maximilian Verstappen by surprise going into turn 3, props. But Max learned for it for the next race and he wasn't going to repeat this. He wasn't going to repeat the same mistake twice, not within 24 hours. That's not who Max is. Do you mean? However, here's the next bit. So bench the quali lap. The quali lap was goated. You only need to go and look back on that onboard and you will see for yourself, like, just levels. Again, you know, when you go over a hill fast in a car and you get that feeling in your stomach. How am I getting that when I'm watching the onboard of Max Verstappen drop that Austrian ball? Anyway, bench that for a second. The second piece that you've got to question how he's doing that. Lando overtakes him into turn 3 doing the sprint race. You shouldn't be able to overtake into turn 4 at Austria. You shouldn't. And you definitely shouldn't be able to overtake into turn 4 if the defender is Lando Norris in a quicker McLaren with his DRS open. I'd forgotten. I spoke to a friend guy after the fact. I was like, did Lando Norris have his DRS open when Max Verstappen overtook him? How? I just don't understand. Maybe it's me being the noddy F1 mind, but I just don't understand that. He's overtaking him on the very next turn when the guy in front, the defender, has DRS and it's Lando Norris in probably the quickest, potentially the quickest car, or maybe at least as quick, if I'm being conservative. Who does that? When was the last time somebody's overtaken a defender when the defender has DRS open? It just beggars belief. Honestly, I don't want to get too gassed up because I was, stop talking about Max. If this were any driver, I just don't understand what's going on. And at this point, Max is doing it as near as makes no difference every race. So that's what we're going to talk about because I'm invested in sporting excellence, in the sphere of Formula One, the weird and wacky circus that is Formula One. And Max is the one that's just doing it each and every single time in a way that Lewis used to do it when he had the car. 2018 Singapore, 2007 Melbourne or Adelaide, the Australian Grand Prix, turn 1, lap 1, round the outside of Fernando El Pan Alonso. And this is why I think it's weird between Lewis and Max. And I said it on Quick Stop yesterday with Nasha, that they are so different. Lewis and Max, they're diametrically opposed in terms of their personality, who they are. Lewis will go to the Met Gala. Max wouldn't be seen dead there or at Fashion Week or wherever. He's not interested. All he wants to do is race and drive on the sim. But as far as who they are as drivers, particularly if you look at yesteryear Lewis, 2007 Lewis Hamilton when he first came in, mate, like he was, I feel like they're the same person. Or at least the same driver. You know what I mean? Safak, you're far too kind. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's similarities there, in my humble opinion. Somehow here in the US, we seem not to be able to put forth a proper F1 caliber driver. I wonder why. Tony, it's a question, it's a question that, and it's one that many people have asked. Here's the thing. There's a brilliant book called Outlier. I'll run through this quickly and then I'll run away. And And then again, we got a hectic schedule over the next couple of days, right? Free practice streaming, quali streaming, also the race streaming. Here's the thing. In The Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell tells a story about what some chap called Bill Gates. And he says, in order for Bill Gates to become Bill Gates, he needed to be born in a certain area. He went to the college. His college had the very first supercomputer almost ever built in them. I'm bastardizing ever so slightly, but had a supercomputer that he could just play on and code. One of the only ones in North America, if not the world. So there are a series of there's a confluence of factors that had to come together in the same place at the same time. That supercomputer, Bill Gates being a very clever guy, his parents being supportive of his want to code and all this other stuff. All these factors had to come together to end up, the ultimate outcome was a Microsoft, right? If, for example, if his college didn't have that computer, then Bill Gates isn't Bill Gates, and Windows is like, I've made Windows or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's sliding doors and butterfly effect, and it changes the entirety of coding and software history. And I think similar, I say all that to say this, there's a similar circumstance with Formula One. It's not lost on me, nor is it coincidence, that the bulk of the F1 drivers are this side of the transatlantic pond, being Europe, since a lot of the teams are based out of Europe, Milton Keynes, like Middle England-ish, between London and the Midlands. So that's the first thing. Aston Martin, Williams, McLaren, Red Bull, they're all based in the UK, right? So as far as the junior programs, it makes more sense that they're just gonna come into contact with more drivers from this region, right? As versus North America or Asia, as an example. It's just that much more difficult for a Yuki Tsunoda or, I don't know, a Zhou Guanyu, just by virtue of proximity and geography. They're not going to come into contact as much with a Red Bull junior team or get scouted. They just won't have it. Plus, you need to have a lot of money. Not saying that North America, but it's a confluence of factors, right? The geography matters, the financial resources matter, the exposure to the junior teams being Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari. You've got to have all these things, and I think that explains a lot of why we haven't seen more North American drivers. It's not for want of talent. What do you mean? There are loads, but even if you look at Palo and Herta can't even get in the FI disrespect Indy so much that Herta hasn't even got a super license. How can Ollie Behrman have a super license? And how can they make special dispensation for Andrea Kimi Antonelli, and yet Carlton Herta can't get? It's just, but it's bull feather. Honestly, it's just absolute nonsense. No, genuinely, I can't with that sort of stuff. I hope that explains, Tony. People are just scared of admitting that Max is number one on the grid. I don't think they're scared, Mark. I think what it is, it's just hard. It's really rare, is it, to find an F1 mind or an analyst that can separate and understand their confirmation. But there's a thing called availability heuristic. There are all these cognitive dissonances, right, that allow you to understand why you think like you think. And I think F1 is rife with it. Confirmation bias, availability heuristic, like all these things that kind of like that blinker you into one way of thinking. And I just think like all of that, I'm not just aiming at like it's Lewis, it's Charles Fossey, like all of the fan base have like this tribalism almost, this like I don't know what the word for it. It's like a set in their ways almost. And how can my driver be the best and Max be the best? It's impossible, right? Those two things are mutually exclusive. So it's just not scared necessarily, but do you know what I mean? You are different, Cameron. Lewis or Max, you give the credit all the time. Octay, I'm almost like a glory hunter of a fan. Like I can't. You saw the football. I don't know how many of you guys are soccer or football fans, but there's a young Spanish player called Lamine Yamal. I mean, I used to play football at a decent level. This dude is like 16 years old, or he just turned 17. And you've just said that I wasn't even interested in the European Championships the other day. And I saw this dude and my eyes just went like this. I was like, okay, so this is different. He's really like not great yet. He's got to do. There are certain things he's got to tick right, but he was, he's really good. And I got excited the same way that I get excited about Max or Lewis when he first came in. When I see sporting flames burn brilliantly bright, I'm a moth to them. I can't help it, But no, I appreciate you, Octane. I gotta give credit. I can never. It's who I am. It's who I am as a sports fan, and that's the lens through which I watch all of my sports, not just Formula One. And I've been watching sports a long time, right? F1, early 90s. Not to give away my age or anything, Tony. Lots of USA drivers have grown up on ovals, I would assume, and that is so very different to F1. But I think they can adapt, Jay. If a Mansell can adapt to Indy, it's not for want of talent in North America, I'd say. Again, that's you can work through that, right? But again, and even you emphasize, you underline my point, Jay. There's different tracks around which they race. It's like a transition that European drivers don't have to make because they're already racing around them. So geography's important. Pablo and Lewis used to do that all the time. 4 or 5 tenths beyond the competition on a regular. I remember Pablo. Look, Lewis, you want to go back and check out the Silverstone qualifying that 2007. He was a force of nature. This is why I don't even understand the beef between the two factions, because Lewis, when he first came on the scene in 2007, like all of the traits that Max Verstappen has, even the bloody line stepping, that was a lot. It's almost like they're not twins, but they're like mirror images of each other as drivers. 2007, 2008 Lewis is in Max Verstappen. What are we talking about? So I don't even understand how the two factions don't get on. It's chaos. So Madeline, Hajar needs to win F2 this year. If he doesn't, no chance for an F1 seat for him. Competition is tough at Red Bull. So Marku talked about them, didn't they? He talked about, there's 3 drivers, I forget the other name. So he said about Hajar, Lawson, and somebody else that potentially they'll be ready in 2 or 3 years, but I can't remember the other name. I think Max will be above Schumi in talking pole. Will Max be above Schumi? It depends on how you want to have that conversation. What are you talking about? Greatest? You're talking about best? Are we talking about the quickest? Are we talking about the best in a championship format? Like, it's you gotta be specific. Behrman's a better driver than I think RBR twins. FIA won't encourage drivers to go to America. They gain nothing from it. And again, visual to that point, they prejudice against the super license infrastructure, prejudices against motorsport formally over which the FIA do not preside. So IndyCar is one of those, right? You get less license points for winning IndyCar. Hasn't Carlton, Palou and Carlton Halter are winners, right? I'm sure. I know that one of them's won IndyCar a couple of times. Like, unacceptable. Genki says Asia has a ton of more competitive motorsports where drivers can go. F1 is pinnacle, but when EU snubs us, we've got several avenues, including US, to go to. I don't disagree. Super Formula A. Genki, I tell you what, I grew up on part of my love for cars. And Genki, forgive me if you've never watched it. Gansan, Tsuchiya, Hattori, Best Motoring. I think these are all super Formula guys that they produced a show called Best Motoring where they'd race loads of sports cars, and I was hooked back in the day. I still watch it from time to time. But Best Motoring, Yashita not Gansan, Hattori always used to go Yashita, whatever that means. My Japanese is really poor, but they were Best Motoring. If you've never seen that and you're a car person, then tuck in. It's all on YouTube now. Goodbye Suga, I think, was my favourite one, but they had an M5 and a Gallardo, and it was Suture, and it was Gansan. Gansan used to drive like Max, but he was an older Japanese gentleman, but he just used to bully the rest, like the younger the younger Japanese drivers. You just need to bully them. Indeed, Max is like a younger Lewis. That's exactly the comparison. And again, that begs the question why these two factions don't get on. It has to be that there's just mutually. My driver needs to win, and so he can't win, and your driver wins, so we can't both. You know what I mean? We can't get along. I might be mixing Herta with Award. I might be mixing Herta with Award, to be fair. What's Jay saying? Chiba, I know. That's why I wrote head to point 2. Because I'm looking at Carlton. Right, guys, I'm going to run. What does Madeline say? And it says, Lawson will be V-Carb. Don't know about Red Bull. I think they'll replace Perez with Ricardo, at least for this season. Our boy's looking fresh out here. Let's go, chilling. Everyone says I look fresh. The reason why people say I look fresh is because I look like such a hobo before. When I grow out the beard, it's not a good look, is it? I need to find myself at the barber's probably like once a week. Let me answer this very quickly and then I'm going to run away. V-Cup. So Madeline says Ricardo will get promoted to Red Bull. I think I read something earlier on my travels about that. I was planning to talk to it on a video tomorrow. So here's my prediction. As far as we round third base on this driver's silly season of 2024, I consume so much bloody information. I can't remember where I got this from, and I really would like to cite the publication because, for the avoidance of doubt, all F1 publications are made equal, but some are made more equal than others. But thank you, Chillian. I appreciate your kind words. Okay, here's the deal. Christian Horner, post Christian Horner gate, the allegations of the PA, all the reshuffling, saying that they were going to sack Helmut Marko. Sources say, rumour on the F1 curb is that Helmut Marko doesn't hold the same amount of power that he did prior to those allegations. That ultimately Christian Horner will have the veto. He will be the arbitrator of Checo, Danny Rick, Yuki Tsunoda, well, not so much Yuki because he's not in the Red Bull family, but Liam Lawson, he will decide their destiny, which makes me think, seeing them at Goodwood, you just want to go and watch the Goodwood Festival of Speed. For those of you who haven't seen it, worth watching. Ridiculous machinery, and they did like a 20th year anniversary of Red Bull's inception into Formula One. All of the Red Bull family being Danny Rick, Perez, Max, they all got in like the Goodwood house with Lord March or whatever his name is, the guy that owns the Goodwood strip, I can't remember. And they were talking, and Danny Rick just looked right at home. Danny Rick is the prodigal son. If Christian Horner has the veto, you can rest assured, that Danny Rick will probably have that seat. Whenever they choose, again, it's critical. It depends on how Checo Perez performs, right? If his eyeballs out and gets like, say he wins 2 races, then again, they don't have this conversation during the summer break. But if Checo performs as I expect him to, which will be underwhelming, not quite F1 flotsam and jetsam, but nearly, as near as makes no difference, then they'll be having a conversation at summer break around Checo Perez's future. There is a performance clause in Checo Perez's contract that states he can't be no more than 5 places adrift of Maximilian Verstappen in the championship. Currently, Max is obviously first. Checo's in 6th, I want to say. So he's not infringing upon that performance clause just yet. The second one is that he can't be more than 100 points adrift of Max in the driver's standing in the championship. Currently, he's 137 points adrift of Max Verstappen, which is the shame. 137 points. That means, let's spell it out for the avoidance of doubt, because this is where it gets chaotic. That means that Max Verstappen could chill out. He could sit on the sidelines for 5 races. He could go on holiday for the next 5. Checo Perez would have to win all 5 of those races, and still he would be 12 points behind Max Verstappen. Look, that is bonkers. How can you be so far behind him? Well, because you've barely managed to get out of Q1 these days. You've been out qualified season to date by Logan Sargent in a Williams 3 times. 6 or 7 times Logan Sargent's career to date. Like, it's just not good enough. And so, listen, I say all that to say this. If they are going to have a conversation and jettison the man formerly known as the Mexican Minister of Defense, then the chap that, in all likelihood, I feel like this is the most likely outcome. In all likelihood, Danny Rick, the Honey Badger, will be the guy to take Checo Perez's place, I think. I think that's the most likely outcome. Just because Danny Rick is Christian Horner's guy, right? Like, maybe even more, as far as favourites, maybe even more so than Max Verstappen. As far as the personal relationship that he has with Danny Rick, between Danny Rick and Christian Horner even, maybe even more so than Maximilian Verstappen. Checo looked like an awkward 50. Genki, he just... Karun didn't help him though, right? Karun suggesting that Danny Rick and Max Verstappen should join up and race as a team at the Goodwood Festival, the revival. It's techie that. Karun didn't help anybody. Have any of you visited the F1 exhibition in London? Tony, I was meant to go to Spain. Peter invited me over, bless him. I was meant to go see it in Spain. I don't think the exhibition's open just yet, but I will try and get down to it because, support Windsor on that because I think he's put a lot of hard work into it. Madeline Lawson, too green for Red Bull. Yuki's too unstable. I don't know about Yuki being too unstable, I will debate that each and every single time. Ricardo will have a chance to drive for his future in a Red Bull. Also, I think that he can adapt better to the RB20. It suits his driving style. He needs a stable car and the braking right. Say adios to Senor Perez. Ugh. Adios to Senor Perez. Oh, the humanity. For Perez 24 is almost a carbon copy of 23. You make a good point, though. So here's the point with Checo Perez. I'll end on this. The salient point with Checo is that when in the early running, so like the first 6 races when he went well, it's all like street circuit tracks, right? Tracks around which it's really important that you are a rear limited driver. If you're good at like hairpins and stuff, Rascasse at Monaco is an example. If that's if you're like Checo and the understeery stuff suits you, that speaks to your driving style, then you're always going to go well, right? Those are the tracks that you do well around. But the second quarter, like a Silverstone and an Austria, he's never going to get Spa. Checo Perez is going to get eaten alive. It's not his track. Those tracks and that car probably, but more so those tracks, just don't speak to Checo Perez's driving style. It's the truth, isn't it? He's just not. That's not him. Doesn't suit him. So I don't know. I think he's going to struggle. I think he will. Bless him. Listen, I talk disparagingly, very, very firmly tongue-in-cheek about Checo. Like I rate him and I like him. He's a very, very good driver, but he's lacking distinctly in form at the moment, and so he's gonna. Good luck, Checo. Do you know what I mean? Cameron, please devote one podcast to Sir Nigel Mansell, current F1 champion, moved to IndyCar and won the championship same year. Oh, the humanity Indy. It wasn't bad. We were talking about Nigel earlier on. I think I might get PW onto that, since Mr. Windsor was once Nigel Mansell's team manager, knows him intimately. Yeah. Anyway, look, I'm gonna run. Stuff to do. People to see. Austrian Grand Prix pole laps to go and rewatch on board. I hope you enjoy that. Go and watch that David Coulthard interview if you haven't watched it already. Beyond the Grid podcast, Tom Clarkson, David Coulthard, Levels, talks ad infinitum about what it takes to be an F1 driver. Not the goatiest, but just to endeavour to try and get there. DC will never rank him on. He'll never be on the Mount Rushmore of Formula One per se. That's not his lot. That's not to say that he didn't win races and have successes, right? 2002 Monaco, 1998 Magny-Cours. On those 2 occasions, he was God tier, but he could never replicate it. And again, I've not heard anybody or very few people talk more eloquently and insightfully around the difference between the very best ones, the GOATs, the GOATiest, your Maxes, your Lewises, your Alain Prost, your Schumachers, your Sennas, and the others, the also-rans, the Coulthards, the Montoyas, the Maldonados, the Webbers, And DC absolutely, like, I don't know, I've never heard somebody put better, brighter colour as far as the F1 tapestry. There is the gap analysis between the average and the very best, more accurately and succinctly, more concisely, the one than the Coulthard that David's. Go and check it out. But I digress.